then we'll be able to go.
It is uploading to YouTube right now. We should be good to start.
Okay. Are we set? Should I go
Yep,
ahead?
all set. Yep.
Okay, yes. Hello there. We wanted to start this meeting. Joe is going to start for us. Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you for joining us in the meeting. More people will be joining as we go ahead, but hello, everyone. And I saw on TV, on the news, it was related to the protests that were happening and all the melee that was going on. And the police were responding to this and explaining what was going on, and there was no interpreter at that time. And I felt that should have included an interpreter because it needs to improve. I think that you really need to have an interpreter there anytime. It's a legal requirement, legislative requirement. You know, all the different departments of any public office should have an interpreter and have that plan and have a develop some sort of plan to make sure that all departments have the accountability to make sure that communication access is there for all people, deaf people too. There's a large population of deaf people here in Rochester who saw it on TV and had no idea what was going on. So there are some deaf people who don't have English skills. It's not their first language, American Sign Language is. And we think this is important to have both languages presented. And we're thinking that maybe you weren't aware of the New York governor related to the COVID virus press briefings had no interpreter on screen. If there was in private access that you could get online, but we had to contact them through Disability Rights of New York and press a lawsuit against them to say that we need an interpreter on TV. And you understand, we were the only state of 50 that refused to provide interpreting services on television. 49 states had this. We don't want to see this happen in Rochester again. Maybe Rochester, you know, if this were the only, need to make sure that we have equal access and we're all on the same page with all 50 states. And so that we have an opportunity to see how we can get this worked out to improve it, to make better access for all deaf Rochesterians here. And that was why I wanted the opportunity to talk to you and work from here. And basically from Matthew here, we want to introduce ourselves as We the Deaf People, who we are. We're an organization that is comprised of all deaf people with very diverse backgrounds, deaf Black, deaf gay, Black women, deaf Black women. We focus primarily on deafness because we define ourselves as people of the eye. We want to change the focus from the ears to the eyes, because for 150 years, from forever, we have been oppressed and forced to use speech, and we can't talk. We can't talk. For example, it's the same as if you're trying to force a blind person to learn colors. You can't teach a blind children colors. The sky is blue. There you go. This person can't see the sky. How can a blind child be able to understand what the color blue means? It's the same with deaf people. We cannot hear. We can never learn to hear. We depend on everything being visual. And for 150 years, we have been oppressed by this, and we're pretty fed up about it. We have become taxpayers. We vote. We're doing fine. We have our own dreams. We become educators. And it's time for us to say, wait, look, this is enough. We can take care of ourselves. But what we want to do is be able to establish that We the Deaf People has become a political and human service organization. And so this meeting is to explain about access. Access specifically. We need access because I myself live here in Rochester. For almost 40 years I've lived here, and I vote, and I pay my taxes, and I pay my property taxes. And I sit and watch TV, and there is no communication there. There's no interpreter. And, I read and write well, that's fine. But an interpreter is for everyone. Several of my friends could not understand what was going on. And people would say to me, "What happened? What happened on there?" And I would have to explain it to them by word of mouth. So this is what we're directly focusing on now, how the city of Rochester can provide good access services. Mhm.
Thank you, Ms. D. I'm sorry, I jumped on a few minutes behind here. So can you just really quick for us, the laws that we passed, I think maybe a year or so ago that required the closed captioning, are we saying that this availability of interpreter was already a part of the laws that we are not following, or something that we need to adjust to add to what we passed last year or so?
I do not think so. I don't think it's included. I think it focused on closed captioning exclusively for TV.
Correct.
I don't think it included interpreters.
But is it something?
And I'd have to check the law again, but I don't think so.
But is it, because you alluded to something, how it was something that was not being followed when you talked about the governor and the state? Is it something that we are just not following that we already have, or is it something that we need to modify with our current laws?
Joe, can you answer that question for us, please? And hold on while the interpreter gets Joe.
Okay.
Okay. There you go. Okay. Now, interpreting right now, there is no law here. Closed captioning, we do have a law for. So it is totally separate. And what we contacted was for public information from city government, any department of city government, the police, the firemen, anyone that makes announcements should have an interpreter with them. And it is separate from the closed captioning, actually. Mhm.
Okay. So there is also no state law that requires this.
Not yet a state
Okay.
law, but there will be one introduced very soon in this session of the assembly. It's going to require that. But we would prefer to have the Rochester City do this first before the
Okay.
state does it. And that would
Okay.
encourage them as well.
Okay, I just wanted to better understand what the current status is.
I had a question about the closed captioning. The closed captioning that we do for our meeting.
But I think the bigger thing that their bigger concern.
Malik,
I'm sorry, who's that?
are you able to hear me?
Now I can hear you. I was getting ready to say something.
Okay, I was in the middle of a question. I don't know if you caught that.
No, I didn't. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So the closed captioning that we do for our meetings, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, they're kind of done with an auto generator, and then someone goes back and edits them. Is that true, BJ?
That's the process that we have been using.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and I understand that captioning can be problematic. It does the kind of AI does its best job to guess what we're saying, but sometimes it's really wrong. And especially for really important announcements, I can imagine that doesn't necessarily communicate the information that is really important at the time that it's happening. And so, in addition to the issue where people may not, English may not be a language that they understand written, it also is a even the captioning can sometimes not convey in English what is actually going on. Is that, do you see that as a problem?
Oh, yes. Yes, I do. Yes, for that. And with CNN, when I watch CNN all the time, I do, to keep up with the news in America. And sometimes CNN captions disappear, and I say, where did they go? And I become very emotional about that. Where did it go? So we really need, sometimes we need captioning is not clear. Sometimes the words are not in the right order. We have to figure them out. If we have a signer there as backup first, then we can look quickly at the interpreter and see what's happening. But sometimes we have to be careful about picking the correct interpreter as well to bring someone in. Some interpreters probably are not good for this. If we pass the law that requires interpreters have screening, then we could find the best interpreter for the job. Because some interpreters know how to translate from English to American Sign Language. So there's that. And Joe has a point? Yes. And you're ready for me? Yes. Okay, perfect. I wanted to let you know that maybe you've already seen in the media and the government, you've seen interpreters there on screen, and maybe you weren't aware if they were good or not good or whatever. But my first experience seeing an interpreter was the best I had ever seen. Was the Minnesota governor had a black, let me see, they were exactly moving with them. They were very good. And it was a dream job. They had a very good team. And we could see that the person who was interpreting on screen was deaf. And there might have been other interpreters feeding the message to the deaf interpreter themselves. And we know that when it's last minute, you have to try to get who you can, and there are names and you can't spell. And when things are going that quickly, you can't stop them and hold a meeting. So you miss some of the information. So one of the interpreters would keep up with that and back up and be able to spell the name and feed it to the interpreter who was there for the governor. And keeping up with the hearing person, and the expression was perfect. And that was my first experience seeing an interpreter who was themselves deaf. This is a new field, deaf interpreting. And they set this up as a model to train other people so that the person on screen is actually a deaf person putting out the language in their native language. And if we were to screen interpreters, both hearing and deaf, and we, the deaf people, are happy to work with you to get that all worked out and coordinated.
I have a question.
So I think
Go ahead, Malik, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think in the meantime, in terms of us figuring everything out, it seems like what I'm hearing from you folks is, particularly for major announcements, we need to make sure that there is an interpreter present, be it the yes, COVID situation, definitely, or what was going on with the unrest. What you're saying to us, if I'm hearing you correctly, is there was not adequate interpreting services for the deaf and hard of hearing, and that's something that you want us to address at the city level. Am I right in that being my understanding?
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'd like to piggyback.
So I think there's the long-term goal of, with our meetings, making sure that we have an interpreter. But I think the immediate item, and we can have BJ address this with the administration and others that do regular press conferences, is to ensure that there is a person that is on the screen interpreting when they have these when they have these important announcements, so that way no one in the community will be left out from hearing the important information. And that may involve a list of interpreters that will be appropriate to do this, and that can be called upon in a short notice, because I know that's what the problem is. Sometimes these press conferences are called at short notice, and there may not be an interpreter available. So that may be something that we can work on correcting to ensure that we improve our access.
Councilmember, if you don't mind. Oh, sorry, Mr. Kolash, it looks like you want to say something. I'll wait.
Yes, I do. And also I want to let you know that you see in New York, the governor has the interpreter there, and that person is from Massachusetts. And they had driven to Albany every day to interpret that. And I think it was for 25 days straight that they had done this. And then he went home. And like yesterday, they called him and said, get back here. We have another thing about having the quarantine from other states. So there is a system. It's important to have a system of a network to be able to set up a template, to have it planned out ahead of time. And as for scheduling, you know, to call, and you can have somebody who would be ready. If there's nobody available, that's fine, but it would be good to make sure that people are available so that you can call them last minute and not just be all at sea about this, to have it planned ahead of time. Okay, I'm sorry. And whoever's was next, I think it's Matthew. It would be nice to have We the Deaf people working with you to arrange for interpreters, because we are the experts in this. We know who's good. That would be nice. If we could set up a system with that, we would be happy to work with you to select interpreters and have them ready and have a list to have them called. So you have a variety of people you could call last minute.
So the city has a contract with an agency that went out to RFP, and we have to utilize that agency whenever we do interpreting.
Yes, correct. But we would prefer to have a say in it, because some agencies stink, actually. I'm just saying. And you don't know. We know what's good. We know what's not good. And we can work with you to make sure that the contract with that agency is the right one. Right now, we have so many agencies in Rochester, too many actually. And I've complained about this before, because there are too many interpreters out there that some agencies just are awful about it. They're negligent in it. And what we need to do is work on that. So if we pass a law, then we'll have to discuss more of what our input is, make sure that it's included, to make sure that you pick the right agency to contract with. And Joe's also saying,
real quick question. Real quick question. BJ, when does that contract end?
I have no idea.
Okay.
That contract is done on the city level, I believe, through
Right.
Human Resources.
Okay.
Through what, BJ? I'm sorry.
I believe it's through Human Resources, but I'm not positive.
Okay. Does that contract come to council?
Again, I'm not certain.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if you're ready for Joe, please. Now, I do want to explain about the RFPs. The concept for the city, I understand totally. I know how the system works, and it's a perfect example. And if I want to paint a wall, say, you know, I can offer it out to contracts. I can offer it for bid and see who can do the painting. You know, some people are very expert, they're skilled, some are not so good. And as long as we get the wall painted, it's fine. You know, I really don't care. You know, it's not that important. It's the wall. You know, you go ahead and you do it. But now, RFP is a good process for that. But for interpreting, it's very small. There's a small, you have no idea of who is good or not. They might have lousy interpreters, they might have good ones, but we have no feedback in that process. And RFP does not include us at all. And we would not like that. Our goal is to have good, qualified, skilled interpreters who have been screened. And agencies do not screen interpreters themselves. Deaf people need to be empowered to do the screening of interpreters. And that's so that you don't just get a token person in there. And I do remember that I had before spoken with Rochester at a council meeting. I had spoken. And I felt as though I could not trust the interpreter because I had no choice. I wanted to communicate, and yet I was stuck with this interpreter. Should we have stopped and held the meeting and say, I can't do that. I'm stuck with them. I feel as though I were oppressed by that. And it's important that you're aware that you don't want to oppress deaf people anymore. When they want to speak, you don't want them to feel that oppression. This is what we have to improve and remove that. And that's the reason why we are choosing the people, we the deaf people would like to have input into who is chosen. And I remember we had a meeting, Elaine's ball. This was a while ago. There was a meeting And when the interpreter showed up, I said, eek, oh no, everybody said, look who they sent. We don't want this meeting now. And a few minutes later, the other interpreter showed up and we said, okay, we will use this new interpreter. Thank God the other one showed up, and we told the other one, go home. If that hadn't happened, I would have been stuck with an interpreter I did not trust. And so we've experienced this oppression forever by them just picking whoever they want. And the policy of the city, I understand. They said, well, we'll give you an interpreter, and that's it. But they're blind to what happens before that. They're blind to what happens with the agency when they choose someone to bring. And again, because there is no system for feedback. Is it a good interpreter? Is it not a good interpreter? It's a really see no evil, hear no evil sort of thing. But there needs to be a feedback system set up so that they can have the goal of having the best interpreter and to eliminate this oppression that we feel from having someone we don't trust.
I wonder if what might be a beneficial piece would be to connect you all with someone in human resources to have a conversation with them. And maybe there is the opportunity
that would be fine.
To have a more fruitful conversation. Because just like how you were talking about the different skill sets that folks have for different things, the council is not the one who operationalizes the contract, right? They're not the ones who do the operational work. What we're able to do is when we have something and we need to put in a request for interpreting, we can do that, but we're not the ones who set up the contract. That would be the folks who work in a different office. And maybe what I'm hearing is connecting you with people who are more close to that service and more close to that that function might be better for this policy discussion. What I would be grateful for is if you all knew any organization or someone that would be willing to sit down and talk with us right now while we're doing these Zoom meetings, or if we're doing a Zoom press conference, because I know the big focus right now is on press conferences or immediate urgent information that could help us understand how better to use the technology that we're still learning, like Zoom, to have an interpreter visible. Right now, we have one of our staff members who has her video blacked out while she takes notes because it makes the screens bigger on Zoom. And I don't know necessarily what the best options are because we're still learning how to use Zoom and want to be able to be responsive. But if there are experts in the community that could give us advice or tips or work with us, I would be willing to do that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think too, whenever we go back to having in-person meetings, there's that technology. I think that one of the press conferences the mayor had where there was like an interpreter in the picture, like a picture in picture, and wondering, would love more information about how to do that once we go back to our in-person meetings. Because I think, we allow people to request an interpreter if they want to speak, but I think we're not, realizing that people are at home and potentially would want to watch the broadcast of our council meetings even. And it could be beneficial to figure out that piece of the technology.
So
yes, exactly right.
Will you connect them with HR and communication, I guess? Because there, as you mentioned, there is the current contract. Until we find out what the dates are and how that works, we could at least try to find some ways to fill in the gaps at the moment while we try to, figure out what legislatively we need to update and how that would work for us. So will you take the lead in connecting, or would you like us, how would you like to do that?
Yeah, I can try to do that through email. The other thing I would note, Councilmember Lupien, is I'm not certain about the limitations of our vendor, which we use to broadcast our meetings. So they may not have the technology in the council chambers to do picture in picture. I don't know anything about that, to be quite honest. And I know that the clerk's office is the team that handles that contract, and that they're the ones that talk with those folks. I've been doing a little bit more of it since we have moved to the online format of meetings, but again, we're still very much learning. So it might be something that we would want to involve the clerk's office in and see if the technology is available. It may not be, and if it isn't, maybe we would have to try to think of different options.
Mm-hmm. And I do have a point from Joe. I believe very strongly that we should have some sort of resolution that says, oh, not to say, oh, we think we should do this. We'll just do what we've been doing and keep it going that way. And I have to admit, I'm not a patient person. I think this has to be done right away. If we don't have the technology, then work on getting the technology there and go ahead with it. And I will keep pushing, because people say, oh, we can't, we prefer not to, we'd like to do what we've done before. And that does not succeed. It doesn't seem to work. So we're setting up a law. We're trying to get that encouraged, to have the law to show to people and say, here you go. And if New York passes the law as a state, then we'll be stuck with New York's law instead of our own. But I would prefer to do this by the city and have the city have it planned, have a draft bill that you could share with us, with Matthew and me, to see if it needs any revisions, to see if we can help advise you on that and discuss with you and revise it, and to get everyone satisfied and on the same page with teamwork. That would be wonderful. And for Matthew, what I want to do is make one point. I don't know how to say this. I don't know, I don't want to make more enemies, but I want you to understand that there are two classes of people in the deaf community in Rochester. One of them is we the deaf people. We're that community. There's another one called NTID, the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, the big school there. And they represent about $7 million in the Rochester economy. And so, of course, some of those people will listen. Some people would rather listen to them and bow to them because they have the money. And, oh, you have deaf expertise. But the point is, NTID was to serve 1,200 students who don't vote in Rochester. We vote here. And what I want the community is to listen to us first as the voters, and NTID second. We could work together, of course, but I want you to understand that we are the community people who live here. We breathe here. We pay the taxes here. And the students come in for 4 years and leave. Okay, they're in and out, in and out. They're very... Now, I think you should use our organization as counsel and expertise and those sort of things. And I just want to help you understand that, because there is a little bit of a struggle between NTID and the community, and there's a lot of undue influence from NTID. And just to let you know, just to drop that in there so that you're aware.
Thank you. What I think is, what I'm seeing is sort of the next steps in this is that I will reach out through email to try to connect you with human resources, as well as potentially the communications department, to let them know that you want to have a discussion related to the interpreting contract, and that you have some thoughts about maybe ways to improve it, including putting together a list of preferred interpreters that would be the first use for city events. And
that would be wonderful.
And maybe that is a potential solution. I know that when we worked with a community member who was deaf, and he had a set of preferred interpreters that we were able to try to do for meetings, though I'm sure you're aware, we cannot always guarantee if we're doing a meeting very last minute, or we have
Right.
different limitations.
Yes, and Joe has a comment. So I think what's important to have is two things. Something temporary for now, just temporary, we realize that, and then long-term goals for this. That would be fine. But what's important is if tomorrow, say, or the next day, there's an important announcement made, what is going to happen? You have to be ready to have a backup there for that, because really we can't wait. I pay my taxes, I expect to have access. And that's the problem, to figure out something to do in the long term, yes, but we do need a temporary solution for now. We need to have them both running at the same time. And right now with COVID, there is worry that there's an announcement. What is it? Is it about COVID? It's something, it could be life or death. And really, we cannot wait. We have to figure out something temporary for a plan and then have a long-term plan running in parallel with it at the same time. And law is setting up a law is a very long-term solution, but there is something we need temporarily. Suppose we need it for tomorrow, and it's hard to predict the future, what will happen.
Right. And the other thing is many of those emergency announcements are not going to come out of the council office, right? Those are things that might require an executive order.
Right.
Those are things that might require to come from the mayor's office. And they certainly do a significantly larger number of emergency announcements in the council and general press conferences as well, because they have their full communications team. So I think y'all are right that the best option is that we should probably start with this by linking your organization with HR and communications and see if they're able to sit down and chat with you.
BJ, you should ensure that it's HR
Yeah, that
and the
sounds
clerk
good.
together, so you're not
And
having to have separate meetings.
that
sorry.
means we need to have, who is speaking for the
Sorry,
interpreter?
that was me. I just, when we pull this together, to join both the clerk and HR together, so you're not having to have multiple meetings about getting the same thing done.
Right, yes, exactly. That sounds perfect. And I have a question. Do you need me to meet with the mayor, Matthew and I to meet with the mayor to be able to talk about this as well, first to have a temporary solution, do you think, or?
I think I would start with the human resources communications group and see what happens from there. And then maybe they will have a different recommendation.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Very good. That sounds fine with me.
I also just want to lift up, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that you asked City Council to pass a resolution. Is that right? I just didn't want that ask to get lost.
Well, that could be possible, a resolution, a law, something, whatever. If you have ideas, please let us know. We would love to work with you, trying to work with you to see which is the best way to go. And we're happy for whatever that is. And Matthew is saying something, something.
Yeah.
And that's what we need, is something with teeth, you know, sink our teeth into.
I would be interested in talking about that.
Yes.
I think that, you know, obviously, I think
And
going the route of
said.
meeting with communications and HR, I think we were over talking each other.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Just the HR and communications, I think, is a great start. And depending on how that goes, I'd be interested in talking with you about, you know, further actions.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Sounds good. Yes.
Okay, sounds good.
So if no one has anything else, I think we could potentially adjourn.
Yep. I think that's great.
Okay, look for an
Thank
email
you.
from me later today. And I'll see if I can reach out to Human Resources to find out who the best person would be to connect you with.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.